Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. Played 11 seasons in the NHL for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And of course, these days, we're talking the playoffs. And to do that, we've brought in again, because he always does such a tremendous job for us, Eric Erlandson, who is the Lightning insider. And of course, he's monitoring the progress, and it's definitely progress, of the Tampa Bay Lightning as they march through the playoffs. And Eric, it seems like the MO of this series is the MO of the last series, where they had that one game in the middle where you wondered, oh, okay, are they going to mount a comeback here? And then they sort of remember that they're the Lightning, and then in game 4, they took care of business, and now they got the lead that you would expect them to have.
Yeah, that game 4 was, in a lot of ways to me, watching it, that was a team that probably 3 years ago, they probably lose that game, right? Like the second period kind of gets away from them. They have a 1-0 lead. It's exactly the way the first 2 games went, tight checking, not a lot of room. Tampa Bay gets the first goal. And then things just kind of went awry in the second period. They got a little loose defensively. Andrei Vasilevsky lets in a goal or two that we're not usually used to seeing him let in. And you're thinking, okay, now they're down by 2. Okay, the game's over. Well, they sort of settled themselves down a little bit, and Carolina opened the door for them with a couple of power play opportunities, and the Lightning took advantage of it. But that was just a team that showed to me maturity and understanding that, okay, we're down by 2. What do we do to self-correct here? They self-corrected, and then by the third period, they were back to being Tampa Bay again, shut down the door, got the 3-1 lead. And here they are on the cusp of going back to, I guess we're calling it the semifinals this year, not a conference finals, for the 5th time since 2015.
You know, I was, I guess you'd call it fortunate or unfortunate to play against the New York Islanders when they were winning all their cups. And they were the same kind of team, right? They just found a way to win all the time. You'd look and see, well, geez, how did they, didn't play that great, but found. So that game 4 was kind of like that for them, right? This is a veteran team now. They've been through the wars, and they've really shown that they've learned how to win.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, Tom. They, it's you look at the progression of this team under John Cooper from that first playoff appearance in 2014 where they were swept by Montreal. That was the first taste for a lot of that young core and for John Cooper as the head coach. Make the Stanley Cup next year, and they felt that, okay, this is it. This is our time. When they got to 2018, they fall down 2-0 to Washington. They come back and win the next 3. They felt, okay, this is our time. Didn't happen. 2019, they get swept. So you just kind of put all those things into a bottle, and then you find out how they were able to win it in 2020. It's like, okay, this is what it takes. This is how hard we have to play. This is the type of style we have to play. And, and we've talked about it before. The great thing about this team is they can beat you anyways. You want to get into a run and gun game, they can beat you 6-4, but they can also beat you 2-1 just like they did in games 1 and 2. And that's just an understanding of a mature team now. With guys who, Steven Stamkos is 31, Victor Hedman's 30, guys that are right there at that center heart of their, the peak time of their career, understanding what it takes to win.
Eric, I ended up writing a column this week about just about this subject that we're talking about now. And, I pointed out that I felt like they didn't win or didn't learn as much winning the cup as they've learned by the process that it took to get them there. And, it's almost like they have the equivalent of a PhD in playoff hockey. They really do have a great understanding of what is required to get it done. And when I was looking through all that, I wanted to look up and see how many games of experience. And I actually chuckled to myself when I realized that Steven Stamkos, who seems like the graybeard of the team, he has less Stanley Cup experience than a lot of guys on the team because he's been injured so much. Like, there's guys like Hedman and even McDonough, has 140 some games of NHL experience, having played so many with the Rangers. And I don't think that can be underrated, that they have so many games. Like, there is nothing they haven't seen.
Yeah, well, even Nikita Kucherov just made his 100th appearance in Game 4. Right. Andre Palat, Tyler Johnson, both reaching that 100 playoff game plateau. And, Stamkos, of course, missed the 2 years for the most part. That kind of puts him back a little bit. But, yeah, it's, John Cooper uses the phrase process over outcome all the time. And that's more of a game-to-game type of thing. But there's a bigger picture idea in there as well. that you stick to the plan, you understand what the plan is, and just if you put the right process in, then your odds of getting the correct outcome increase greatly. And that's kind of what the philosophy is. But when you've got guys who have experience as much as this team has, you understand what that process has been from a, season to season type thing. When they set all those records in 2019, they were the world beaters, right? Like the greatest show on ice. They were the team that was destined. They were finally going to put all that playoff disappointment behind them and get it done. This is the team. And then you don't win a game in the playoffs. It's very humbling. It's a very humbling situation for the entire organization. Sent them into a lot of soul searching to understand it. And credit to Julien BriseBois for not blowing it up, for not changing the coach, for not changing the core, understanding, okay, what do we need to tweak now? What's our next step? And they went out and did it. And they went through some growing pains before the pandemic hit last year. But they put it all together in 2020. And now you're just continuing to see the signs of that process growing.
So obviously, I mean, you can't tell. There's been comebacks in the past. Any chance Carolina can get back in this?
I don't count Carolina out. There's one thing that team, and watching them, the 8 times this year that they played, they will not quit. They have Rod Brindamore's engine. He just doesn't stop. You talk about a team taking on the personality of their coach. He's the guy. The problem is their depth is hurt, right? Like they're already without Nino Niederreiter. Vinny Trocheck has missed the last 2 games, and that's a big loss with Trocheck, second-line center, second-line leading scorer on the team. Really good in the face-off dot to kind of give Jordan Staal some support in the face-off circle. That's a big loss for them. Warren Fogle got hurt in Game 3. He played in Game 4, but you have to wonder how effective he is. It looked like he hurt his shoulder there in that game. But the one thing you can count on with Carolina, they are going to fight till the end. They will not wilt and go away because that's just who they are. That's their DNA. Whether it's in games or not.
Yeah, I like that presentation of Carolina of having Brindamore's engine because they really do. I think that's why he appreciates this team so much is that he has gotten them to play the way that he liked to play, and I think that's why I don't think he would have ever considered leaving, even though people say that he may do that. I don't see that happening. But I want to take you out of the playoffs a little bit, just because I'm working on this process of the expansion draft, and there's no more intriguing team than the Tampa Bay Lightning because they have salary cap issues to begin with, and they purely love Seattle to take Johnson, and I'm not so sure that the Seattle will have an appetite for that just because his production is on the decline and everything. And if they don't take him, they're vulnerable to lose some really interesting players. How do you see, Eric, that playing out? And, will there be multiple teams involved in bailing out the Lightning? Will they call on their friend Steve Yzerman? What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, you're right on Tyler Johnson. I don't think Seattle needs to market a Washington-grown player, right? Like, I don't think as an expansion team and the excitement around that team, you need to worry about having he's not even necessarily a local kid from Spokane, but he's from the same state. And based on the production, and Ronnie Francis was in Tampa a couple weeks ago watching some of the games, trying to get a feel for things. But if you're Tampa Bay, first of all, I don't know if I'm trying to make a side deal like so many teams did with Vegas in their expansion year. We all saw the success that it led to for Vegas. But Tampa Bay is interesting because they've got so much depth. First and foremost, they have to understand they're going to lose a good player. They are going to need salary cap relief. So whoever it is, you hope maybe they take one of the guys that have a little bit of a higher salary, like a Tyler Johnson, let's say. But then what do? Do you go 7-3 or do you protect 4 defense? Because if you're just protecting 3D, it's Victor Hedman, it's Mikhail Sergachev, and it's Eric Cornet. I think Ryan McDonough is going to end up being exposed. Not that Seattle would take him, but I think he would end up being exposed in this situation. Then you have to decide, do you want to protect Cal Foote? The one thing they don't have is depth on defense in the organization. And he's a former first-round draft pick, and he got some time in the NHL this year. And, do you believe in him enough to have to protect him from Seattle taking him? Well, if you do, then you have to go the 8-skater route. Well, you have to protect Nikita Kucherov. You have to protect Steven Stamkos. You're going to protect Braden Point, and you're probably going to protect Anthony Cirelli. So all of a sudden now that leaves a Yanni Gourde, an Andre Palat, an Alex Killorn, a Ross Colton, all these other players that are going to have to be exposed. So I think Tampa Bay is probably in a situation, assuming they want to avoid making side deals, that they're under the realization they're going to lose a good player to this expansion draft, no matter who it is, and then that will set off the start of trying to shed some salary because they're going to have to shed salary. We all know the situation they were in this year. The Nikita Kucherov injury opened up an opportunity for them to keep most of this team together for another playoff run, but it just kicked the can down the line, and that can is coming next month once we get past the Stanley Cup final and into the expansion draft and free agency.
Okay, you can call me crazy. If you want to call me crazy, you can. But would they ever leave a Steven Stamkos available to get picked?
Well, he has a no-move clause, so it would be Steven Stamkos' choice whether or not, and I can't see Stamkos, letting that allowing himself to be exposed to the expansion draft.
Doesn't McDonough have a no-trade clause too?
He's got no trade, but not the no-move. Remember, it's only the no-moves that have to be.
Oh, he's got. Right? Oh, I thought he had a no-move clause. Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to be the interest. Plus, there's the parameters. You have to expose a defenseman that's played so many games at the NHL level. They don't have a ton of those guys, right?
And do they have a lot of good young prospects?
Not. You wouldn't call them grade A. You'd probably not even call them B+ prospects. But they've got guys like Alex Barré-Boulet, who's been a top scorer in the AHL the last couple of years. Got a little taste of the NHL this year. They've got Taylor Radish, who's a former second-round draft pick. Boris Kachuk, who's a former second-round draft pick. So they have some guys who can step in and probably play at the NHL level. For what effectiveness, we'll see. But they don't have any grade A prospects, not anybody of that caliber. Yeah, and the one area they don't have is D, like I mentioned. They've got Cal Foote. They don't have a lot underneath him in terms of defensive prospects. So that's why I don't wonder if that comes in their equation when it comes to protecting players.
Right. And do we know yet for the next round, assuming Tampa wins the series, they reseed the teams again, right? The 4 teams, correct?
They do, but because of the way things have shaken out, we know that the matchups are going to be the winner of Tampa Bay, Carolina faces the winner of the Islanders and the Bruins. Oh. And then Vegas, Colorado gets, we assume at this point, Montreal, but the winner of the Montreal-Winnipeg series. So it's just the way it broken down. There's no chaos, unfortunately. The most chaotic thing you could have would necessarily, if Montreal ends up winning that series, you'd have 3 Eastern Conference teams and 1 Western Conference team. I'm still looking forward to the potential of a Tampa Bay-Montreal Stanley Cup final. That would be weird.
Eric, do you think that Tampa's goaltending has been as good as we would expect it to be?
At times, yes. At times, no. You look at the first 2 games in Carolina. Andrei Vasilevsky was terrific. Game 6 against Florida, he was fantastic. But he's let in 4 or more goals, I think, 3 times in this playoffs. I don't think he did that at all last year in their run to the Stanley Cup final. So he's been off on a couple of goals he's let in. I think that speaks to they don't have the same depth on the back end they did last year. It's a big reason why they went out and got David Savard, who missed the first 3 games of this series. But no, he needs to be on a more consistent basis, better if they're going to keep advancing beyond this round.
And how was Tampa done against the Islanders in Boston? That's right. They didn't play them at all. That's right.
Yeah. Didn't play them. Yeah. But no matter who it is, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but no matter who it is, it's a team that they faced in the playoffs last year, right? They got Boston in the second round, beat them in 5. They had the Islanders in the conference finals and beat them in 6.
And both those teams, they're just tough to play against too, right? They're just in your face all the time,
Yeah, and look, Boston's a much different team too, right, with Taylor Hall. He's given them a different dynamic and given them depth and the chemistry that he's had with David Krejci on that second line. I mean, one of the big reasons Tampa Bay's had success against the Bruins in the playoffs the last couple of times they faced them is because it's just been the Bergeron line. That's it. They haven't had any depth, and the Lightning depth has just kind of taken over those series. Well, now they got Taylor Hall, and it's a little bit of a different story if they happen to meet those 2 teams. But Islanders Bruins best of 3 is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I thought that Taylor Hall move was a terrible move, but it's turned out to be a great move. Yeah,
I agree. I didn't think it was going to work out, but it has.
From a selfish perspective, I think I'd like to see Boston versus Tampa against Vasilevsky goaltending matchup too. Although,
especially since Rask missed last playoffs, right? He looked at the bubble, so
yeah, for sure. All right.
And the one question too with Carolina is their goaltending, right? Like they started with Nedeljkovic, they went to Mrazek. Mrazek didn't have a great game in Game 4. So what do they do heading into Game 5 now? Do you go back to Nedeljkovic? Do you go stick with Mrazek? Do you tap on James Reimer? It's a little similar for Tampa Bay what they did in round 1, right? It went from Sergei Bobrovsky to Chris Driedger, back to Bobrovsky, back to Driedger, back to putting in Spencer Knight. So here Tampa Bay is in the second playoff series. They've got another team questioning their goaltending situation.
Yeah, when I watch Carolina, I think that sometimes everybody is right, and by that I mean, the whole entire hockey world was saying Carolina should have gotten goaltending help in the offseason, but they chose to go with Mrazek. And, you watch that, very important Game 4, and you're thinking, boy, would they have been better served in the offseason when there were a lot of goalies available going out and changing up their goaltending. But they chosen not to do that because they liked Mrazek. So.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do in Nedeljkovic because I thought he was pretty good in games 1 and 2. I know he made the mistake on the winner in Game 1. But look, he led the AHL team in Charlotte to a championship just a couple of years ago, so he's got some of the pedigree. He was really good during the regular season. I think Tampa Bay faced him 3 or 4 times during the year, and he was really good. And again, I thought he was pretty good in games 1 and 2. I was surprised they went back to Mrazek for Game 3.
Yeah. Eric, we cannot let you go if we don't question that T-shirt you have on.
Mandalorian, Baby Yoda. It's Mando Mondays.
Didn't some goalie in the league have a mask with that painted on his mask too? Am I missing that? That's what
I think you're right because the show has been out for a couple of years. I think the show came out in 2019. So it's a very popular character as you can imagine in the Star Wars universe. But it's Mandalorian. It's my Baby Yoda. I have a mask too, which John Cooper got a kick out of the other night as well.
Nice.
Tom, what are the odds that you have watched The Mandalorian?
Well, yeah, I might have to rearrange my sock drawer when that's on.
Yeah. Of course, I have watched that entire series and enjoyed it greatly. All right, Eric, always a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for providing us some insight on the Tampa Bay Lightning in the playoffs and what they might be forced to do in the expansion draft. So thanks a lot, and enjoy yourself out there. This is supposed to be a fun time.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun, guys. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to the next time.
All right,
thanks, Eric.
That was Eric Aronson of Lightning Insider, and if you have a lot of interest in the Lightning, you really should subscribe to his work. He's really on top of things. That's interesting. I thought for sure that, but I know Eric's right on this. That McDonough had a no move, but it's only a no trade. So that saves. I thought Eric Cernak. I thought they might have to trade him. But now, if they do put McDonough out there, I still don't know whether I would do that. McDonough's pretty valuable to that team. But he's older. He's
older, and they got to get cap space too, right? I mean, Remember back when Chicago was winning their cups and they had Bufflin, they had to trade Bufflin, a whole bunch of guys, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that would, but would they take McDonough? I mean, he's got 6 years left, so.
I wasn't crazy about him here in New York because I almost felt like he was called on to do too much. There they got Hedman, so McDonough could be that second or third guy, whereas here he was the number one guy. That's the problem to me. If I'm thinking if he goes to the expansion team, they're going to look to him to be the number one defenseman. I'm assuming, and I just don't. For some reason, I just don't think he fits in that role. But
I don't see that they would look to. Ron Francis has been around the game a long time. I'm pretty sure he knows that McDonough is not a number one. Oh.
Well, but on an expansion team, he might be though, right?
Yeah, but they'll get somebody. There's, everybody's always looking to move. I mean, he'll be flawed, but there'll be an offensive guy. Like McDonough is a good first pass guy, but he's not an offensive defenseman.
But that was the problem here in New York. That he was kind of, they had the C on his sweater. Or he was called to be that number one guy, and didn't work out.
Yeah. I don't think Ron Francis is going to get quite the cache of young talent that George McPhee wrangled out of the.
Why don't you think so?
Well, because I think everyone's smarter than that. Eric alluded to that. Like, they've gone to school now, so what they learned from the last expansion draft, that in Minnesota with Alex Tuck and Anaheim with Shea Theodore, is that in an effort to save a player, they ended up giving up players that were more hurtful to their team than if they let the player go. So I don't know.
I guess I just think though that I've said this to you before, and I'm not criticizing George McPhee at all. I think he did a fantastic job, obviously, putting that team together and the coaching staff and the whole bit. But I still don't believe that he thought he had a team that was going to be that successful right then. He was still taking guys like Carlson, for example, that had scored like 6 goals a year before, right? All of a sudden now he becomes a much better player. So
you don't think there was a conversation where George and the scouts said, he's better than 6 goals. Like, I don't know that they thought he was going to get 40, but they took players that they thought had a lot of upside.
That's true. Yes, you're right. That is very true.
But I just don't see that Seattle will be that good.
But you think of what with the discussion we just had regarding Tampa, right? And that's going to happen 31 other places around the league. I mean, not everybody's as stacked as Tampa is, that's for sure. But, but
I think you look at the projections, and I've looked at this now. It's not, like they got James Neal out of Nashville,
right?
And now James Neal is kind of a symbol of bad contracts, and they want to try to get rid of all those guys. But back then he was a legitimate scorer, and he scored for Vegas. Like, he was an important player on that team. Now those kind of players are going to get traded. Like, Colorado has the possibility of losing because Eric Johnson has a no move clause. They gotta keep him, and they have to keep Cale Makar, obviously, and then now this is tough, Devin Taves or Girard. Ooh. So now they would lose potentially Girard or Taves. Well, they're not going to lose one of those players. They're going to trade them somewhere and get a better value. Like, those are really good players,
right?
And Taves has got a great contract at $4.1 million for 4 years.
So then you trade one of those guys for something else. Then you still ain't going to lose a defenseman, though.
Yeah, you do, but you just lose a journeyman, or you acquire a journeyman. So it's not the same. I don't think they're going to. They're not going to allow that kind of transaction to happen.
Right. Yeah, so, you're right. Yeah, if you could trade a valuable player and get something back for him.
Yeah.
For your future instead of losing them in draft. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there'll be some deals done. Like, Steve Yzerman in Detroit has said that he'd be willing to take a bad contract because they're not ready, close to competing yet. Right. So. He's got a lot of cap space, so he could take a James Neal contract for 2 years and maybe get something good from Edmonton to give Edmonton more cap space. He could take a contract from Tampa, but Johnson's still 3 years. I don't know. Even Steve would take that. I think that would require a first, second, a third, maybe.
But with the James Neal guy, you're putting him in your lineup. You're taking away a spot for your young kid, though, too, right?
That's what you got to factor in, and he doesn't have that many spots because this year Yzerman has to put in, he needs room for Lucas Raymond and for Moritz Seider. And then he's got Giovanni Smith, who I like. I think he's a hard-edged player. I would assume the kind of player you would like. I think he could score 10 goals at the NHL level, but he's going to be tough and, full of vim and vigor. They got to find whether Dennis Cholowski can play, finally once and for all, because they're out of options on him. And they got that Gus Lidstrom, who is kind of a stay-at-home guy. So you got 5 guys you got to find room for. And there are a bunch of guys leaving, but I think you got room probably for one more guy. So
you got me thinking. So it may not be that Seattle gets as good a team. Maybe a team like Detroit ends up getting better because of this draft, because they're able to trade for some of those players that teams just don't want to give up.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. So, and especially the players that are in their age bracket, like it doesn't make any sense for them to, take an older player unless they're just getting rid of the contract.
But a defenseman like Taves, if you put a defenseman like Taves in Detroit, that's a good pickup for Detroit, right?
Yeah, he's still 27 years old. Girard's only 23, right?
So then what would Detroit have to give up to get Taves out of Colorado?
That's a good question. A lot will depend on what the market is for him.
Right. Because Colorado's going to say, well, we're not just going to give him away. Then we'll just let him go in the expansion draft, right? Yeah.
Right. So they're going to want something for him. But, you're not going to give up a first-round pick for him.
Right.
Because Colorado's over the barrel.
Right.
So, what I think it would be worth a second round pick to get a guy who fits into your rebuild. Like if I'm Buffalo and I'm rebuilding my team, and now I'm going to trade Ristolainen somewhere. And what have I said all along about trading Ristolainen? Like I wouldn't do it because you can't replace him. It's hard to replace, guys that are playing your top pairing. So you trade Ristolainen, you get something for him, and then you acquire Taves. You give up a second round pick, but you plug him in.
But it's Taves an upgrade over Ristolainen?
Yeah, or you keep them both.
Right.
So
actually, I was reading today where Buffalo's come out and announced that they're getting phone calls on everybody, including Eichel. And I don't know why. I don't know where the genesis of that story is, but I don't know why they would announce that they're getting calls on everybody. GMs get calls on everybody all the time, anyways, right? I mean, they're always having conversations. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I'm and I'm sure the Sabres are saying, well, and Layla doesn't like him, so. We need to get rid of them. So, I don't know. We ought to have that run along our side there. The list of players that Tom doesn't like, not personally, but because of the way they play. We can put Duchesne number one on that list, or is that number one? I can't.
That's just not an accurate statement. It's not that I don't like them.
Well, it's not as players. No, personally, may like to have a beer with them, but.
I think it's more that I'm thinking, guys, like I'd like to sit them down and say, listen, you're not getting everything out of your career that you could be getting. Like one of the best players that I ever, when I was in the agent business, was Dallas Drake, as far as getting the most out of his career. Like when he got done his career, he could also, that was his way he played the game, being a captain of St. Louis, Stanley Cup in Detroit, all that. When I watch Eichel, when I watch Johansson, when I watch Duchesne, I mean, guys, wake up. Especially like Duchesne and Johansson there. They showed what they could do in the playoffs for a short period of time. Why didn't they do that during the regular season?
Yeah. Well, but if you were the general manager of the new Hamilton Timbits and you had Duchesne sit in front of you and that expansion board, you wouldn't take him.
No, not at all. No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that attitude of my team. Yeah.
And what about Eichel? Would you take him?
Eichel, I would probably take him because I think his upside is. What's that?
You take him and trade him.
I think his upside is very high, and listen, I guess the team I would want to build. Well, I remember years ago we did that thing when you were still with USA Today, and the team I built. I still think it's that and it's proven out in the playoffs, that big team, and especially now because you can get big, heavy players that can skate now too. And they've got to compete. So that's Duchesne and Johansson. And it's too bad because I like Johansson when he plays his game down in Nashville there. I like him as a player a lot. And he did that in the playoffs there for a short period of time, but it just doesn't show up all the time.
Yeah. I think if I was thinking about this too, you definitely have a specific style. Like if Brian Burke announced that he was moving to India to meditate, and the Penguins hired you to be general manager, I think you would want to do the same, or not general manager, but director of hockey operation. I think you would want to do exactly as what Burke wants to do.
Yeah.
The Penguins need to be bigger, stronger, more physical.
Definitely. Especially nowadays, because in the old days, if you got bigger and stronger, more physical, you'd think, well, the guy's not that skilled. But nowadays, with these young kids, especially, you can get bigger, stronger, more physical, and have a skilled player. So,
one thing that I recommend, and I've based this on watching Bill Zito's team. I would go, if I was the Sabres, and look at the AHL free agent list, and I would sign the two most feisty, hardworking players in that league, and I would tell whoever my fourth or my coach is, put these two on our fourth line. That's where we're going to kind of start the rebuild. We're going to have energy, and we're going to be hard to play against. Like look at Bill Zito. He brings in Gudis, who's really hard to play against, and he hits everybody. Then he brought in the Lomberg kid, who's a bundle of energy, a Tasmanian Devil style. And boy, those two players really had an impact. And as I was watching that, I was just thinking, you should change teams around the edge, because that's what people remember. When you go in and played Florida this year, after that game is over and you're having a beer with your buddies, you were saying, boy, Lombard was a pain in the rear end.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Or like even before the game, and you're looking at the sheet and who they got in the lineup, and you're going, oh, God, I got to play against him tonight. Oh man.
Yeah, and Gudis is a handful.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. So there is a way to at least change the look of your team.
Yes.
That doesn't cost you much, and there always has to be the feistiest player in the AHL.
Yep. Totally.
Just like I don't understand why. If I was a team that needed goaltending right now, how many teams are there over in Europe? Like, I don't know. Wouldn't you just say to your pro scouts, tell me who the best NHL potential goalie is in Europe, and let's try to sign him and bring him over and roll the dice. I mean, what have you got to lose? You know what I mean?
I agree.
Maybe they don't want to come because, they can make more over there. If they're in the KHL, that's probably true. But just because of the entry-level salary. I mean, that works against us when we're trying to sign KHL players.
No, I agree.
Anyway,
right.
Let's, before we go, just a couple of comments. Whose wins is it? You like Boston over the Islanders still?
I don't know so much anymore. That's a toss-up in that one, really. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of those teams wins.
Yeah, I like what Eric said. It's fun to think of that come down the best 2 out of 3. So
Good hockey too, maybe playing hard.
Yeah. And I want to say this about the Montreal Canadiens before we go. We keep talking about, just how ridiculous this is that, Montreal is there. But maybe they just figured out how to bottle up the good offenses.
Right. And doesn't that happen every year? There's always one team that gets a certain way along in the playoffs. So you think, how do they keep winning? But they keep on doing it.
Yeah. They've got momentum. Shea Weber, your boy. All that. It's amazing. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be back on Wednesday to talk about more playoffs. You can catch me at Detroit Hockey Now, where I write about the Red Wings, and also at Hockey Buzz, where I write national columns. So,
and you can listen to the radio version of this show at 365 Sports at radio.co. All right, buddy. We'll see you on Wednesday.